Hi, welcome to the FEROCE Sessions. I'm your host, Annick, and we're here to have discussions and conversations for you to be inspired to live more fiercely. Today I have as a guest Jipala Kagan, and this is not her first time on here. This is actually her second time. The first time that Jipala was on here, we talked about what is acupuncture. Jipala Kagan is an acupuncturist in Kingston, New York, and we kind of felt like the first session needed to be about what acupuncture is and what the context is. But the only thing is that even within that hour of conversation, there was still so much that we wanted to get into. So I've had Jipala back on today so that Jipala and I can kind of discuss some of these things that we didn't have a chance to discuss before, and hopefully you'll find it interesting. This session is going to be a little bit more experimental because we're going to go off on different topics and we'll see what you like. And please, in the comments below, tell us, what do you like and not like about this session? And should I do more like this? All right, Jipala. Welcome.
So exciting. This is an exciting one.
It is. We have many topics to talk about that have come up.
I know. How do we choose which one to start?
Well, right before we got on here, you were talking about the patterns of living and some of the things that you see that happen in your personal sessions for your work. So
Right.
maybe you can talk a little bit about like what that even means.
Okay, that's great. It's a big question.
Let's just start
So
with
let's just right. And it's experimental. So it's probably the first time I get to answer that question in an interview.
Cool.
And what I'm assessing at this point is patterns of living. I mean, we had spoken about the 5 elements last time at length, and one of the reasons I enjoyed studying the 5 elements so much was because it is basically a framework for patterns of living. But what I have jumped off the Chinese medicine train with is I've been watching humans now and how they interact so much in the world. And I'm starting to notice that even just in our culture, there's just these patterns that exist that we all live under the framework of, but we don't necessarily, they're not actually true or truth, but we live under the framework and keep perpetuating them anyway. And one of the things that's occurred to me is that as I talk to my clients, that they don't realize how much there's like falsity in that because they don't see what I see, which is so many people saying exactly the same thing.
So do you find in these conversations that people think that they're insular, that their experience is special and it's not shared by other people?
Yeah, actually, yeah, exactly. They also think that what they experience is isolated to them somehow.
So can you give an example of like what one of those patterns might be, or those thought processes of where we think that we're different?
Yeah, it's funny. This morning I was talking to a client and I was mental noting like this is good. This is what I want to bring up with Annick. And now, of course, that I'm on the spot, I'm like, what were we talking about?
It's always
But
how it is.
we're talking. Oh, so this is my newest one, the one I'm captivated by right now.
Okay.
It is this idea that we live in we're in a logical world. Or if we're logical, we can control our experiences. And what I'm coming to realize is that no matter what, there's always an emotional experience that is much a part of anything as our logical experience. And something goes on here in this culture that we like logic because I think it's quantifiable, so we like it.
Yes.
We train people in school to be pretty logical, and we reinforce it quite a bit. So logical people get reinforced, and non-logical, like emotional people or intuitive people, don't get reinforced too well. And then we work like that, and everybody sort of buys into it. And then there's a place, which I'm seeing now, where it doesn't work. Logic isn't going to solve that problem. But often in the health world, logic isn't going to help us. And I realize like behind almost all the symptoms, almost all the problems that are going on in people's lives, there's an emotional and a deeper than even emotional, because we talked about that last time. Emotions are only one section of things.
Right.
But it's even deeper than that. There's like all these feelings about, what's happening and how they feel about themselves.
Okay.
I don't know if
That's a
enough.
big, yeah. I want to break that down a little bit
Let's break
because,
it down.
okay.
Because that's huge. That's like a huge topic.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is. And it brought up for me as you were talking several different thoughts about personal experiences that I have had in relation to this.
Right.
So the thought about somebody's self,
Yeah.
one thing that I is a big topic for me that I like to discuss, and it's also one that's hard for me to put into words that don't quite fit our standard of like how we should think about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of self-hate.
It's fundamental here.
Right.
In
And
this culture, self-hate is fundamental.
and people don't want to, the way I view it is that people don't really want to talk about it because we're told you should love yourself, you should love yourself. If you say some mantras every single day, you'll love yourself and everything will be okay. You got to love yourself. And it just doesn't work that way. I don't think that that's even, I mean, I think that's a huge falsity.
It isn't addressing the issue enough to just band-aid it with the mantras or trying again to access your intellect and change the way you think because in Chinese medicine, this belief of self-hate is probably coming more from like our hearts. It's coming from more of our embodied self of who we are that we hate. You can't say to like again, you can't say to your intellect, okay, well, I shouldn't
Right.
hate myself, so I'm not going to now. I mean, we all try that, and it's worth the exercise of trying that. We should all, we all try the mantras. We all again, another little myth that's perpetuating around here, especially for women, even though I don't isolate things. I try to be very careful about gender stereotyping at this point in my life because I really don't believe that anymore. But with that said, a lot of women say like, I need to take care of myself. I'm going to go get my nails done or get a massage. And that, those things are nice to do, but they're not what we're talking. That's not
No.
self-care.
Yeah.
And that's just, again, that's externally motivated. Like if your nails look nice, you look nice maybe to someone else.
Right.
Once in a while, maybe it's like you love getting your nails done so much and it does make you happy, and that's great. But I think what we're trying to do right now is deconstruct myths that seem to just people buy into over and over again. I get a little confused about how much people can believe them without thinking about them further. But then I go back to what I said earlier, is that I think if you don't, for me, because I see it so often, I had to think about it. I had to say, like, why does everybody say the same thing? And everybody's experiencing the self-hate thing. Oh, everybody. That's like, I didn't realize that. It took 10 years of seeing people every day saying exactly the same thing. I thought, oh, okay, everybody thinks that.
Yeah. And this is a huge topic for me because it took me a long time to see it as well. And I did a lot of work around it personally, but also in conjunction with other people like yourself. And also another gentleman that I talk to very frequently, Dr. Torelli. And I want to go back to what we're saying about this, in particular about the nails or like taking yourself in those very particular ways, that's a logical explanation, and we're trying to deal with it logically.
Yeah, it's like you have a problem and here's your solution to it. Just do this one thing and it'll solve it. Which isn't the way you can solve that problem.
So to move that into the emotional or the context of what you're seeing within your practice, what can you differentiate perhaps what an emotional response or how dealing with that would be different?
Yeah, that's a good question, because what winds up having to happen is like a deeper self-inquiry into your own way of being in the world, and it take into account how you were raised and how you were treated by your family and the important figures of your early years. It always has a relationship to that though I'm not a therapist and I don't like to focus on the story too much. However, the story does have to be investigated, and it has to be investigated beyond intellect. It has to be investigated with your heart. It's like you might know now, in retrospect, that some things about your family that you didn't know back then And we can say, and we want to forgive them for, being flawed because our family was flawed when they raised us. But with that said, it still doesn't negate the fact that you felt that way, or you believe something, you got a belief into you that was in your younger years that you've kept believing, even
Right.
as we're an adult, and we now need to shed those beliefs. But we have to be pretty real with ourselves.
Well, we do. And I also think that this is a process that could take our whole lifetime, which also doesn't fit into the context of modern society where if there's a problem, there should be an easy solution, and that should happen over a relatively short amount of time. And I think
Yeah,
something like this just can't be done in a short amount of time. I think it's life work.
I do too. I don't think it's an easy. There's nothing. Very few things actually have very simple solutions to them, even though
Yeah.
that's how everybody seems to talk. But this particular one, no, this is a cycle. You would go through it numbers of times, even revisiting a lot of the same feelings. But it does shift, and it shifts on a slow track.
And when you say shift, is it in a way where it's easier to deal with it or to be aware of it? Because awareness, I think, is probably a pretty big thing around this. Just self-awareness that it exists.
Yeah. For lack of better terminology, I just call it, truth. But the more honest you are with yourself, the more this heals. And the more honest then you can be with other people, then it heals again. And then you can go through even further steps. So there's honesty of self, honesty to other people, and then forgiveness, right? We wind up having to forgive all the people in our lives for being flawed. And we have to forgive ourselves for that as well. These are not, again, things tackled in one short period of our life.
Right.
But there are real things. They are true things, and they do move. It does happen.
So when you see these patterns within your clients or you're observing in your practice, are you seeing that over, because you have I think, you have a tendency to have people that stay with you for a long time.
I have a good body of clientele that I've seen for long periods, 5+ years.
Okay.
Some of them even longer now. I've had clients for like 12, 13, 14 years.
Wow.
Long time to know somebody, yeah.
It is. And then you're able to go through see them in different phases of their lives and also these different cycles.
I have seen, amazing growth patterns in people. That was, I write about this a lot, and I've brought this up a lot. And the age old question, like, do people change? Which is something I revisit I revisit that question often because I keep trying to decide, is there a real answer to that?
Yeah.
And I have seen profound change in people. It was really hard work that they did, and they had to go through very, very difficult experiences. But yes, they actually have changed. It's true. It
Okay.
does. People do change.
That's very hopeful and beautiful.
It is. I know. I mean, I think there's parts of ourselves that always stay the same. So that's a little confusing, but there are parts that do. The way that I talk about it now, there's just parts of ourselves that seem to get enough space that they don't act the same way anymore. But there are fundamental personality traits that I think we'll always carry through our lives.
What other patterns are you seeing? Or
So
topics, I guess.
yeah, the one I started right with the logic.
Yes.
That logic solves everything, and basically what I guess if you're open to it, I'll just keep going back to them,
please do.
keep unpacking them. But that people for the most part are afraid of their emotional responses for whatever reason.
Yes.
So we go there too often. However, they're tied, like I said, tied into everything.
So when you say the emotional response, can you give an example? Like, do you mean where I feel like somebody's done something to me, and my emotional response might be anger or grief or something I'm not expecting? Is that what you're?
That is one of the things I'm talking about. Yeah, when people, yeah, it's right. It's like the unpredictable nature of the self, right? Or again, what we're saying in this overculture, you're not really you have a little bit of room about how you can feel like, and it's again, it's gender specific for the most part. Like men can feel angry. They can't feel sad.
Right.
Women can't feel too angry. They can feel sad. Fear, we all experience fear all the time, but no one ever wants to talk about that.
Right. I this brought up when you were talking that I'm not personally considered that much of an emotional person,
Right.
in context when people are talking to me. But the times that I do get called emotional is usually from men when they're not happy with my reaction to
Exactly.
something
That's a
they've
good
done,
point.
and then I'm emotional.
No, I know. That's my
Yeah,
point, actually.
yeah,
How infiltrated this particular topic we're having, how embedded it is in the system. It's so embedded in everything, it that we don't. It's hard to even notice. That was why I was calling it out. And I know other people have called it out. I'm not nearly the first person that's talking about this.
yeah,
But one of the things I wanted to imply or to imprint as we have this conversation is really how actually true this is. It's not just dismissive, like that's like a funny antidote or anecdote, but it is really harmful because if you're told from a young age that you can't, feel these
yeah.
feelings, it causes lots and lots of imbalances in your life as you work very hard against feeling things.
Right. So it's this numbing, basically a numbing of society, which then leads to bad behavior like drugs or alcohol
So
dependency to just push it all down.
I do. I think it's a root of a lot of the imbalances that we see. I think it's simpler. Like, again, I need to think about how I would say this. I don't exactly know how it got into place, but my suspicion is, and these are just my own theories. My suspicion, it was just easier to control people and run like the culture or the town or whatever the structure of social life. It was easier to run it by not dealing with these things. So
Right.
they were just shoved off to the side because it made it like almost, I guess, simpler. And
'Cause-
that worked okay for a while.
right.
Now life is like the culture has just gotten too complicated for that.
Well,
It's not okay anymore. It can't function any longer.
right. Because when people see emotion and they don't know how to deal with it, and they see it in somebody else, it causes like a panic of not
Oh,
being able to control.
that's a good point. And that's something I point out now. So
Yeah.
one thing that happens, right? So when someone has an emotional response, the other person gets uncomfortable often and doesn't want to deal with it, right?
Right.
That's totally true. So they'll shut it down in that person.
Yeah.
They'll say something, an overstatement. Oh, everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
But they won't deal with that person's upset, that something's happening there.
And what, in relation to that, what I have observed personally and have had to work through personally is that if we don't allow a feeling to an emotion to exist, it
Right.
perpetuates. It stays much
Oh,
longer than actually.
okay.
Go ahead.
Oh no, you keep going. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll add to your.
Okay.
Yeah.
So to allow a feeling to come in and to really feel it is a huge challenge if you've been raised or you have lived a life where you're stuffing
Yeah.
that it is very uncomfortable, but then you find out like that emotion doesn't last very long when you feel it.
I know, isn't that so wild?
It is. It's like it's mind-boggling. It's actually like beyond mind-boggling to me.
I know how much energy you wasted trying to keep that emotion at bay, and then when you have it, it's less energy to just deal with it.
Yeah, because I can put that emotion at bay for years, and I think a
Oh,
lot of people
people
do
do.
this.
Most people do. I mean, I myself included.
Yeah.
I've dealt, I spent probably 20 years stuffing emotions that I had as, from events that happened to me as a child. 20 years of it, like keeping them at bay and criticizing myself kind of constantly every time it came up, and it came up all the time.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, but then you're saying, and we're talking a long process of me becoming that it's okay to have that emotion. It was okay. actually now, as I said, and I've finally gotten to see lots and lots of people and listen to, lots of and read lots of information. I've researched this topic thoroughly. And then one of the things I started to find out was like, everybody probably would respond the same way that I responded to the catalyst. Right. Everybody. It's not even unique to me. It was just that I didn't know that.
Right. But did you feel shame around it? Because like I most certainly have.
Well, shame's always the next thing. Shame's
right.
That's the one that keeps everything in place, right? So
yeah,
the feeling, know that the feeling's not acceptable, and then shame is the moderator. Like shame's always there in the back of our minds, keeping us in place, keeping us behaving, keeping us, reinforcing our self-critical nature. And so let's just be clear. It's a huge topic. Yes. We're having a huge conversation, and we're not going to, I said, like break it down today, and right. We're not going to get it all right today either. So I want everybody who's listening to us to not think that we've solved this right. And that we're giving off exactly everything. I think it's more that we're exploring the topic and trying to get it into more awareness. And as that can grow, then, we can keep working on it. It's a work in process. But it's really last time we talked a lot about the emotions, and when I reviewed our interview, I thought, okay, like that was interesting that we got on that topic so much. But one of the things I was thinking here is so we're now talking about why that was important, like why that conversation was important to have those emotions and allow them to be, because what I'm saying now is I've worked with more emotional responses in myself or in my clients and stuff. Under the emotional responses is something else, but we don't even get to that something else because we're all stopped at having the emotions in the first place.
Because it's like unlocking the first door. So we're stuck in this like ante room.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the diseases of this culture are born out of a lot of what we're saying, like the addictions. A lot of the addiction work that's done and the codependency work that's done is born out of self-hatred.
Yes.
And that's where a lot of that's coming from. Like not believing deep down that we're perfectly fine as who we are.
Yeah, worthy to
with
be
our
here.
Flaws, with our shortcomings, with our fact that we might get angry more than someone else does, or I treat people all the time that are like they just happen to be like sad people.
Yeah,
they get sad a lot, and they're like railing on themselves constantly. I get sad, and I'm going to them like, really, is it such a big problem that you're sad? Like, it's not. You feel sad, like you have have a sensitive heart. Things affect you. I don't know. That's not a bad thing. It's okay to be sad. I think some people are more sad than others, and it's okay. What turns out to be more of the problem is how much, again, they don't think they're acceptable for being sad.
Right. It's the self-talk that really, no, we talked about this a little bit in the previous session, which is that the emotions are almost also like thoughts. They're fleeting. They can come in and they can come out, and they can come in and they come out. And you're not necessarily attached to what that emotion is. If you're sad every once in a while, it doesn't mean that you are just a sad person.
Right. That's a good point. And I think also in Buddhism, they talk all about that stuff constantly, like, not getting invested in the thought, not getting invested in the emotion. But one of the things I think about, like, they also talk a lot about how sadness, like I brought Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche up last time, but I just happen to like his work a lot. And he talked about sadness was like the fundamental emotion that pretty much we all feel all the time. And it's just pretty, like, again, he made it sound more normalized.
Right.
And I've thought a lot about that in the 5-element context, but it's true, because we feel sad like when anything really changes around us, even if it's positive change or negative change, we feel a feeling of sadness, and things are pretty much constantly changing around us. So it would kind of make sense that sadness was a pretty predominant feeling.
That's a wonderful point, because it is something that that is a huge emotion next to, people will talk about fear. Like there's a lot of,
Right.
but people don't talk much about sadness, but they do it in a context of suicide prevention or in these like bigger,
or depression. Yeah.
Yeah, which
Yes,
is,
you're right.
there's so many different types of sadness. Like one thing that I have a problem with modern society is sadness around death.
Yeah.
That mourning is not given its proper time and structure and attention. And that's kind of, I think, interesting to me, because death will not elude any of us.
Oh, I don't even, again, that's a great topic. I listened to this wonderful audio it was actual CD, Martine Pertel, and it was called Grief and Praise. That's the name of that. And he talks about how indigenous cultures really could grieve. Like they get into grieving and they grieve for a long time and they grieve hard. Like when someone dies, they wail and they rip their clothes and they go out into the village, into the village square, and everyone rips their clothes and everyone wails. And it's like they really are grieving. They've lost something. It's very painful. He talks about, in that Grief and Praise, he talks about here in this culture, not allowed. You can't do that.
Can't even take days off of work to go to a funeral.
I know you can't even, I treat people constantly who lose people that they love. And a month, 2 months, they're like, I'm doing better. And I'm thinking to myself, like, how is that possible? It's been 8 weeks. Like, you can't be better. But you again, another place where that mind or the logic says, well, I have to be. People are sick of hearing me talk about it. It's been 2 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, no way. And so one of Martine Pertel's like statements is, if you can't fully feel grief, you can't fully feel any joy. So people get stuck in a grief cycle, like for probably a good portion of their lives sometimes.
Wow.
And they can't, really feel a lot of joy because their heart is clouded by this grief.
That's really interesting.
And it's not, and just to be clear, and just to stay in the same track that we're talking about, it's not like it's a bad thing that people should feel that grief. I think it's actually an appropriate response, but people don't allow themselves. So it turns into a shame-based experience that they're trying to get away from, and then they're causing like more problems. They're causing maybe depression or maybe anxiety or maybe something else that's going on, and then it sort of functions after that, and they deal with managing instead of, but we don't have and I'm not blaming anybody because we don't have the tools. If someone's wailing and ripping their clothes, we're freaking out, we're not able to stay with that person in that grief. Like we're trying to make that better. Like, but I'm guessing if we allowed it, it would just like, so even staying in this track, if we allowed it, if the grief could move, if we could feel all those things, if they could keep moving, and it would take a long time, but if it could move, it wouldn't ever then get stuck and turn into something else that we had to deal with. Right. It would be what it was.
Like a physical manifestation of an illness or something.
Sure, a mental illness that will come after that. Yeah.
You were alluding earlier that after this phase of emotion, or maybe I don't know that I should call it phase, this pattern of emotion, that there's something else that we don't get to. What is that?
So that's just something I have a glimpse of now. I'm not feeling I have a very, very strong handle on it, but my glimpse and my feeling, and not my emotional feeling, like my more intuitive feeling, which is a little bit different. After there's awareness, and after the emotions can declog themselves, which may take a very long time, and then after we can move through and we can get to a place where it's like, I can feel these emotions and they're not going to kill me. You know what I mean? Like I can have all these experiences. After that, there's a feeling of, how do I explain it? But it's the interaction with the world changes a little bit, and it feels like, I can be here. And I can do what I need to do. And it like, I talked about embodiment last time. It's an embodied sense that you're present, basically more present in your life and less making your decisions and less making your life choices based around all of this that you were afraid of and that you were trying to hide, rather than you get to make your life choices on what do I really want to do? How do I really want to be? Who do I really want in my life? Who makes me, who are the people in my life that feel good and I really do feel like are healthy? Then I want to be with them. Who are the people that aren't? Okay, I don't really want to spend that much time with them. And it clears something. It's like all that stuff is clouding the vision, clouding the way. We can't make. It's almost like I've been thinking about it even recently. It's like we almost can't even just accept it, like that we are living the life that we're living with our, before, and then but then we can, and in that place of acceptance, living my life and feeling more comfortable with who I am. And I'm not saying that it's just about me, Jipala, by the way, because I struggle with all the same things that we're talking about. But the more than I can actually extend what it would, in my mind, be real compassion to someone else, because I'm like, oh, they're doing the same thing I'm doing. They're no different. And I can have compassion for someone like that. So it changes. Everything all of a sudden has a different, I'm looking through different lenses all of a sudden at everything.
And then I would also perhaps add to that, in the context of what you're saying, that it would seem to me that also allows you, because you have compassion for and an understanding of what someone else is doing, what they're doing doesn't bother you as much as when you take it personally.
Well, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
You just said exactly what it winds up. What myth gets freed in what I just said is that all of a sudden it's not personal.
Right. Yeah.
It's not about you. These people make decisions based basically on themselves and how they feel about themselves. They don't even the deepest loved relationships, your children, your family, your significant other. Fundamentally, it is based on how they feel about themselves, actually, not about how they feel about the other person.
Right. Yes, 100%.
Totally. Which is such a misconception, right? Because if all of a sudden you could understand that about someone, gosh, that's like totally frees you up. It's like they did it because it's how they feel about themselves. This doesn't even have to do with me. That's amazing.
It is amazing. And well, it takes you out of the victim mindset, which that's a whole other huge topic that we might have to save for another day.
Right. But the victim, let's save it for another day, but it's totally related to everything we just said.
Yeah.
Right. It seems like to me, the victim mindset's right about controlling. But once you don't have to control the situation, you wouldn't have to play the victim role because you don't have to be there. You
don't, and it takes up so much less energy. You like when you're talking about that expansiveness that you've now received pretty much as a gift, you don't have to worry about that anymore. None of your energy is going towards being worried about somebody else or those concerns.
Exactly. And it doesn't exclude that people do horrible things to other people and they have to be dealt with and they hurt and you might be angry. And we're not glossing over anything. All of that is still real. It just takes out that piece that it is because we're walking around so self-hate with so much self-hatred and so much shame and so much bottling up of our own emotional responses. And it's getting us so bogged down that when someone else does something to us, it's because we're not good enough. We suck. All these things, right?
Yeah.
We can't even see it clearly. Like maybe they did it right because they think they suck. It really didn't have much to do with us. And then, but it doesn't exclude the fact that we would have to deal with it anyway. You'd have to talk to that person. You'd have to say but one of the things I think communication is so lousy around in where we're existing right now is because of this kind of stuff, because the conversation's not even real enough. It's not, generally if someone does something that hurts someone else, it's the victim mentality goes into place but they can't even have that real conversation of really why someone did it, which was probably something to do with themselves, but they can't admit it.
No.
So you can't have compassion. You can't have the connection that you would need to heal from that.
Yes.
It's a big deal. We're getting into a huge topic, but I do think it's relevant. I feel like it's relevant. And when I was saying patterns of living, I think these things are really relevant in the sense of how we're going to heal as a culture and how we're going to move forward as a culture, and what, and what's going to be important to us. I do think this is very valuable to even just consider, because I think it's at the root of so many other problems that we see.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of the hugest things that are going on kind of are rooted in this.
And as you said earlier when we first started this conversation, was that today we're not trying to solve anything.
No.
And I'm not here on the FEROCE Sessions to give people like a 5-point list of, these are your 5 takeaways from today.
I'm never going to be able to do that. Ever. Like that's not my strong suit. I can't boil it down into 5 bullet points.
Yeah.
Like, it's an entire discussion that you would revisit multiple times.
Yes. And I think that that's what's so beautiful about this. So, you and I will sit down, we'll probably have different evolutions of this conversation. But I want people, from hearing us talk about this, for them to at least think about how it applies to their lives and whether or not they agree or disagree with what we're saying. And so I do want to say that this is an open dialogue, and I would love for people to comment below the video to just let us know like what they think.
I'm fascinated by it, because one of the things I'm a little limited by is that the major body of my work is based on people who come in here to see me. Mm-hmm. So I don't get a lot of feedback from, just someone who would just hear this and then give me their feedback. I'd be interested in that.
Yes.
See if they resonated with it or not.
I agree.
I mean, I've told you I'm teaching a class and to younger, to teens and some people in their 20s, mm-hmm. but they resonated really well with this. I was pretty surprised. And so that was, again, I thought, I learned a lot even in that, like, because they weren't, I'm not treating them. They're not here to, it turned into a little bit of a discussion, but the way they were responding to it, I was thinking, oh, they get it. They actually got it. I didn't even have to talk about it too much. Something about them was like, yeah. But then I was thinking young people probably would be quicker to get this than adults, because they're still figuring it out. They're still working out the layers. Like the adults, we have the layers on.
Right. The suits of armor. Well, I feel like this is maybe a good place for us to end for today.
Sure.
Okay.
That sounds great.
But before I ask you the last question, where can people reach you and see you on social media?
Right. So I've got transpersonalacupuncture.com, which has a ton of writing that I've done. And then I'm posting on Instagram at the handle is transpersonal_acupuncture. Mm-hmm. And then now YouTube. We have a video on YouTube.
Yes.
So that'll be there. And that's it for interviews of mine that are public. Okay,
wonderful. I do want to say that we're going to put in the show notes, but the episode that you and I did previously is called What is Acupuncture? So there'll be a link there for people to check that out, which will give some context to what we alluded to when we spoke today.
That was like the first conversation, and mm-hmm. we were sticking more in the acupuncture world. This conversation, we've jumped in more into what I'm calling patterns of living, which is my next kind of thought process.
Well, I can't wait to see more reading, or to read what you write about this, because I think you're probably going to delve into this probably a little bit more.
Yeah, this will be the next body of work that comes out of this, out of everything that I've done. It's these patterns of living. But just to be clear, that's not even my idea. Like 5 elements, those are patterns of living. They were so for thousands of years. That's been part of this. Ayurvedic has patterns of living. We have them. All the older cultures seem to have addressed this a bit. Mm-hmm. We're just having to revisit it now in our Western culture.
And put it into a different type of language, maybe.
It definitely has to be a different language, because we don't understand. Like, reading all that stuff doesn't always make sense to people, but this conversation that we had does make sense. Like that whole self-hatred piece and the way that we talked about it. I mean, that resonates mm-hmm. for most people. Most people, when they look, I guess that's not true. Like most people are either divided into people that hate themselves or people that, or that think they're like pretty much amazing. Like there's kind of those two divides, and there's not a lot of people that have a more balanced perspective of who they are.
All right. The final question is,
Yes.
what does it mean to you to live fiercely?
Right. That's good. I like that question.
Okay, good.
So for me, to live fiercely, this is, again, using words that are not quite adequate to answer your question. But for me, the two most important things in the world to living are being present and being truthful. So and that's something, again, I go in and out of every single day 1,000 times. But if I can be present as much as possible and truthful as much as possible, then that's being fierce to me. That's owning this life and knowing who I am and making my life, decisions based on those things. And I'm challenged constantly with that, just to be clear. I have not solved this by any stretch. My children on a daily basis challenge me out of being present. And, well, moderately truthful, but, but that's what matters most to me in all aspects of whatever I'm going to put my energy towards.
I love it. Jipala, thank you so much for joining me again today. And I have a feeling that this will not be our last session together. So have a great...
No, we didn't even get into the crone, right?
I know,
so
we didn't get into the crone.
Keep meaning to. But the crone to me is an analogy for this. It's like the fierce woman who owns herself. That's how I'm looking at the crone these days. Out of that self-hatred period, women moving out of that self-hatred period into, I'm who I am. It's okay.
All right, we're talking about the crone the next time.
Yeah, I love the crone.
Okay.
Have a wonderful day.
You too. Take care, Jipala.